Modern great Janelle Monáe is finally back with a new album, and it is great to see. We've waited so many years for this album, and it's very nice to see that quite a few of my most anticipated albums of the year, right at the start of January, that hadn't been announced yet, are slowly starting to come true. We just need Joanna Newsom and Frank Ocean to come through with an album now. That would be lovely. I, along with many other people, have been championing Janelle Monáe's music for quite some time now. She's put out some of the best albums of the modern era. The Arcandroid is absolutely spellbinding and stellar. What an achievement of an album that is. It just floors me every goddamn time. The music is perfection on that thing. The vocals are sublime. The scope of the album is massive. For a debut album, what she did on that album is extraordinary. And of course, she kept delivering beyond that too. The Electric Lady, which I initially underrated, is a great album. Some amazing songs on there like Prime Time, Queen, and then there's Dance Apocalyptic. Such a good album, and perhaps her most successful album to date, I guess, in many ways, depending on how you want to measure it. Dirty Computer, which saw her potentially nearly win Album of the Year at the Grammys. It did get a nomination. It got nominations for other things too. It seemed to be an album that turned a lot more heads towards her and had a bit more I guess balls to it. Like there was a more adventurous approach, particularly to the writing and the lyrical themes on that album. I don't think it was quite as good as her previous ones though. That's what I will say, maybe my hot take for the day. Up until that point, I did think it was probably her worst album by quite a distance actually. But honestly, most artists would kill to have an album like that because it is really, really strong in a lot of ways. There's some excellent songs on it like Make Me Feel, like an absolute all-timer that one is. And yeah, it was only really because she set the bar so high with the first two that I think it was inevitable that there was going to be a drop-off really. But I think again, I'm in the minority with that. I guess I just hold her to a high standard. I think she can do so much better. And yeah, even still, what an airtight discography that was up until that point. I am kind of setting this up in a way that's making it about to sound like I'm going to say, well, up until that point, it was airtight, but then she dropped a stinker, man, which I do think a lot of people are pretty much saying and mimicking at this point about the age of pleasure. But actually, I don't want to say that, because as much as I am kind of disappointed with what she delivered on this album, I sort of see where she was going and what she was trying to do, and there is quite a lot of appeal. Appeal in many ways, one of them being sex appeal on this album, because she is pretty openly very much wanting to talk about that on here. But actually there is a lot of appeal sonically to this album too. What a nerd to say a word like sonically. I do feel like it's such a nerdy thing to say. It's quite obviously the album where she just kind of wants to let go of everything. It's kind of the album where she just doesn't really want to live up to any particular expectation. I feel like she's just delivering something here that she wants to just have fun with, have a carefree attitude towards. You can really hear that in the music, and unfortunately at times it makes the music sound quite scant, and it feels a little directionless as well with some of the songs that are just ridiculously short. But I can't pretend like I'm not going to like it here, because I kind of do. I do like the overall vibe that this album brings. It is a perfect opportunity to drop this at this time of year because it's so summery, it's so relaxing, there's just no shits given really. It's very much the sound of what you want to hear while you are at the beach, or perhaps you're just vibing with your friends on a sunny day. It is cliche as all these things sound. I just think there is a time and place for this album. It just is nowhere near landing in the same ballpark as what she's given us before, and I think she's pretty self-aware in knowing that, right? I mean, she can't possibly think that she was giving us an album here that was meant to be on the same listening experience as the Arcandroid. I think she's aware of that. Opening two tracks kind of give us something that we have heard similar things from her before, with the kind of trap sort of style. We have heard songs like Django Jane in the past, where she just kind of goes for a little bit more of that rugged style where she is kind of bordering on rapping. There's sort of some like triplet flows coming through on the first track here. float. The hook is catchy. It's kind of redundant in a way, in a weird way. Similarly with Champagne Shit, actually, these two tracks feel so similar. Even everything down to the horns, like those kinds of Maxo Cream type horns coming through on this trap beat, which is a very odd comparison to be making when you're thinking of Janelle Monáe, but that is the first thing I thought when I heard these two tracks. And they do kind of offer almost exactly the same thing, and it's a bit of a weird thing to have back to back and not necessarily provide something different, but I still think they both sound pretty cool, actually. And yeah, immediately you're noticing that lyrically, man, the drop off is so apparent, like talking about rich shit really on Champagne Shit. Just not really anything to grab onto here in terms of, you know, lyrical content. But I kind of feel like she gets away with it a little bit because she's just got so much charisma and swagger. It's a little weird though when you get to Black Sugar Beach though, and you know, it's basically an extension of Champagne Shit, where you're just kind of thinking, was this really necessary? And there are some moments on this album where some of the tracks kind of just seamlessly flow into one another, but they end up just being like 50 to like maybe even less than that, 50 seconds to a minute or even less, and it's just kind of the song kind of playing out. It's almost like an outro, actually. But I will say, in the negatives of that, there's actually some really slick transitions on this album. Like, some of the tracks really flow so nicely into one another. If you take away the fact that some of them feel like extended outros, once you get past that point, they flow pretty well into the next song. And I think that's becoming a little bit of an underrated thing about this album, actually. I'm not seeing many people talk about these slick transitions because they sound so good and they just sound so effortless as well. But yeah, of course, you do get from there to Phenomenal, which features Doechii, who is a really, really promising up-and-coming rapper, I think, in the game. Some really great songs from her that we've had so far. And yeah, this might be the best song, actually, not just for the Doechii feature, but goddamn, this track just has, again, so much going for it that shouldn't work, really. I'm looking at 1,000 versions of myself and we're all fine as fuck. There is something about that line that should absolutely not work, but Jesus Christ, does she sell the hell out of it. She has that command to her voice. She has that Grace Jones feel to her voice that makes this work so well, and it just makes her sound so cool, as opposed to being narcissistic as hell, which the line is literally super narcissistic. But the delivery, there's something about this, man. Delivery is everything when it comes to music, like seriously everything. And I think this track proves that, because these lyrics are so self-righteous and just so up their own arse in a way, but the fact that she is just so cool and sells it, and the fact that she literally looks the way she does, I mean, she's insane. Like, you don't need me to tell you how insanely attractive that she is, but the fact that she just sells this is just ridiculous. Very, very much in the feel of what we were getting from Renaissance last year from Beyonce. So much reminds me of this track, of that era from Beyonce, and I wouldn't even be surprised at all if Janelle was inspired by that album for this particular track. And maybe just the general nature of this album might be Renaissance inspired too, because there was something just so carefree about Renaissance. Obviously it's more power in the beats and more attention grabbing, so they're not the same in terms of how they sound, but maybe the attitudes and the ways in which they both went about selling themselves on both albums are kind of coexisting in the same world, really. I mean, Janelle Monáe is probably a big Beyonce fan, you'd imagine, so it wouldn't surprise me at all. But even still, what a great track this is, man. It's just so good. The beat is great. Again, the Doechii feature sounds cool as well. And yeah, I have said this a few times on this channel recently, but there is just something so TikTok about this track. Like, I think if there's a trend about to burst at the seams, it is this song, because it just has that kind of like narcissistic feel to it that I think a lot of people would grab onto. And I think there's probably a funny way in which you can spin some of these lyrics on TikTok to turn into a trend. So yeah, maybe some intentions were spun there from Janelle here, but yeah, even still, I think it's a good track. You've got Haute is a track that is very much just feeling yourself, honestly. There is very little to say about this track, but again, I think the delivery is really strong. I think this kind of short track flowing into other tracks and feeling like they're just kind of coming and going reminds me a lot of that Solange album, actually, which a lot of people kind of didn't really like compared to A Seat at the Table. But I did actually appreciate what she was going for on that album, and I did kind of feel like some of the tracks, as short as they were very memorable and very catchy and very hooky when they were on. And this album has a lot of that in spades. Like this track particularly, I think really, really feels that way. I think the only track really I'm going to have to skip, I'm going to have to totally not want to hear again, is Lipstick Lover. I tried so hard with this track, but it just eventually occurred to me that I just really don't like this approach to reggae at all. I think Janelle missed the mark so badly on this track, actually, that it's ended up just being pretty bad. The track, though, that has the approach done well is Paid in Pleasure. This track has a bit more of a dancehall feel to it, a bit more of that reggae feel to it, just like Lipstick Lover, but it sounds way better. It doesn't feel static. It doesn't feel like the beat is just dying and is moving with no pulse at all. This track, Paid in Pleasure, is basically what I wanted Lipstick Lover to be. So it proves that she can do this style well. It's just so badly executed on Lipstick Lover, and a terrible single choice, like so bad. Why Phenomenal is right there, or even Paid in Pleasure is right there if you wanted to give off that reggae feel, and yet you picked Lipstick Lover. I just think that was a huge miss. Maybe the record label pushed that. I don't know. If Janelle pushed that, then that's fine, it was her choice, but I think there is so much more to offer as a single on this album than that track. Only Have Eyes for Two is a track that I'm kind of wondering if it's like some kind of cheeky reference to polyamory or something. I feel like that has been something Janelle's mentioned in interviews before. I'm sure it's been a talking point somewhere where, you know, Janelle's mentioned polyamory and things. I don't know though if I'm wrong about that. But anyway, I don't know. Maybe there is some actual other meaning to this track. But yeah, it's a bit of a silly play on the I Only Have Eyes for You thing. It's kind of fun and quirky. I mean, the sound of the song, again, like I'm trying my best to just ignore the lyrics on this album, because honestly, it is probably by far the worst aspect of it. But in terms of how the tracks sound, I mean, I enjoy the way this track sounds, actually. The melodies are nice. There's some really sharp melodies coming through on this album, which you would expect from a singer like Janelle. But yeah, it is just a shame that a lot of other aspects of this album are really dragging it down, like the writing, like some of the scant feel of the tracks and how they kind of come and go really quickly. Yeah, and some of the musical approaches, like some of the reggae-isms that I've already mentioned. Like, there are lots of things that are kind of hampering on this album and dragging it down. But overall, I quite like how it sounds, I can't lie. It's got a very nice feel to it. It's very simple in how it's presented. It's definitely nowhere near her best, but I don't think it was meant to be that kind of album. And yeah, I like it. I like it overall. I'm going to be very generous here and give probably the most generous 6 out of 10 I may have ever given, because I do think it's kind of teetering on the edge a little bit, you know? Like it is kind of just about scraping over the line. It's just about getting over the line there, because again, there's so much about this album that kind of feels like it's bogging itself down, but overall I think it's done relatively well, and just kind of goes to show that even when Janelle's at her worst and at her weakest, she's actually still giving us pretty nice music here. Like, I know that there's going to be a lot of backlash towards this album, perhaps this review actually, but yeah, I don't think, again, you know, you can go too wrong with this. Like, there isn't that much going badly here, you know what I mean? Like, it's pretty weak in places, but there's not really much going terribly wrong. And I think, again, 4 albums in now, Janelle's still giving us some pretty good music. Thank you for watching this review. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've had an interesting perspective given to you here. Hopefully you agree with me at least as well. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you agree, if you disagree. Tell me why. Have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already. And speak to you soon. Goodbye.